What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Boomerang Podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Drew, and today we're excited to present a special guest, Dr. Sebastian Gorka.
Thanks so much for coming on, Dr. Gorka. Just to give you some background on Dr. Gorka, his family fled communist Hungary. He worked in the Department of Defense in counterterrorism and irregular warfare. He was a strategist and advisor to President Trump in the White House. He is the host of the America First podcast on Salem Media, and he is also the author of The War on for America's Soul. And you can also see Dr. Gorka on sebgorka.com. Welcome to the show, Dr. Gorka. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me, guys.
So just to get into it, I mean, you were working, obviously, during the Trump presidency. And I think what everybody really wants to know is, you know, what was it like working for President Trump? It's got to be wild stuff.
Yeah, as you can imagine, I travel the nation. I give speeches all the time. Wherever I am, whatever the audience is, sooner or later, I get the same question. What's he really like? And, here's the bad news, guys. If you've been alive for the last 20, 30, 40 years, if you've, turned on a television, gone on social media, you know exactly what it's like for, working for President Trump. And, I met him in the summer of 2015. I got a call from Corey Lewandowski, his campaign manager, who was saying, we're trying to prepare Mr. Trump for the GOP debate on national security, and we need somebody to prep him on the big issues like Russia, Iran, ISIS, right. North Korea. Would you be willing to come and work for him as a special advisor? This is summer of 15. And I thought, well, okay, let me meet him. So I flew to Trump Tower in New York. We sat down, crazy meeting. But the first thing I realized, in a private setting, he's at his desk in Trump Tower. It's just me and him and Corey in the corner. And I realized the guy behind closed doors is exactly like the guy in front of 60,000 people in Iowa.
That's awesome.
Or, on a TV screen when he's doing The Apprentice. Unlike every other scumbag in the city, because I've been in DC for 15 years now. I worked at the Rand Corporation back in the 90s. And I coined the phrase the DC handshake. So when you go into a room with politicos, lobbyists, or whatever, you're at a function, and you got to introduce yourself, and you're shaking somebody's hand and saying, I'm Sebastian Gorka. This scumbag is already looking over your shoulder to see if there's somebody more important in the room they should be talking to instead. I mean, it's just this city of Janus-faced individuals, the perfect hair, the big white smiles. Nobody's honest. Donald Trump, what you see is what you get. And, don't get me wrong. I grew up in England. I went to, private school, debate club, London University. It took a little bit of getting used to that. When it's just me and him in the Oval, he's just as raw, just as real as if he's, in a stadium with tens of thousands of Americans. So, yeah, it was a wild ride. And to think about this, I mean, in my first book, I wrote about this. Think about this. We win the election in 2016. And the day after the inauguration, January 21st, 2017, I thought I was on the clock. It may have been a Saturday, but I said, hey, we won the election. The boss has been sworn in, so I'm going to work. And Saturday morning, I get driven in an unmarked vehicle to the West Wing, get my badge, do all the paperwork. Nobody's there. Everybody's still hungover. I don't drink, so everybody's still hungover from all the parties the day before. And I'm getting shivers right now telling this story. I'm walking around the West Wing, okay? I'm choosing out my office. I'm saying hi to the Secret Service officers. And 5 years before, I hadn't even been an American citizen. I mean, I'm a naturalized, I chose this country. I'm a legal immigrant to the United States. And then, 5 years after swearing the oath of allegiance, I'm walking around the flipping West Wing. And then I'm working for this guy who, let's be clear, I love reminding my fellow Americans who are born here, guys, you did something really quite extraordinary in 2016 that everybody forgets. Every president from Washington to Obama, every single one of them is connected. How? Whether they're Democrats, whether they're Republicans, is irrelevant. They're all members of the political elite or the military elite. Every single one of them is a retired general, former senator, former congressman, or governor. Every single one of them. Right. And then in 2016, to use my buddy Dan Bongino's phrase, we flipped the double barrel middle finger to the elite, and we said, screw you. We don't want another politician. We don't want another retired general. We want somebody who's completely outside of the system, and we're going to vote for this guy who isn't owned by anybody. And this is the key thing. This is why they're trying to destroy him now. That's why they tried to destroy him for 4 years. That's why they've indicted him 4 times with 97 charges. Why? Nobody owns this guy. He's a self-made billionaire. He isn't owned by big oil, big pharma, big tech, military-industrial complex, the unions. Nobody owns him. And that's why he's a threat to the swamp. So yeah, it was a wild ride, and God willing, if we do our part, we'll have phase 2, because we've got some unfinished business.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that
That's
story.
Amazing. Yeah, that's incredible. So, I mean, you've consulted everyone from the CIA to the Green Berets to the Navy SEALs. I mean, when President Trump tapped you on the shoulder to serve, I mean, what would you say, what was the difference between, let's say, having a position in the administration and your consulting work prior to that and some of the positions you held? What would you say the big difference is there?
Well, it got real. I mean, suddenly, so, my first book, The Defeating Jihad, is basically what I did for a living before I met President Trump. And I think this is why I got that phone call in the summer of 15. This is a summary of everything I did with my wife for more than a decade. We had the only external, we had a private company. I was teaching for the Marine Corps. I was teaching for National Defense University, but we had a private company called the Threat Knowledge Group. And we had the only external contract to provide training on Al-Qaeda, groups like ISIS, to the FBI, to the Green Berets, you name it. I've briefed naval special warfare, you name it. And at that point, I mean, I'd served in the British Reserve, so I've worn a uniform, but that was back in the 90s. I was in a military intelligence unit. After that, everything was theoretical and classroom. And I'd be at Bragg talking to guys who are going to go down range and give these jihadis a dirt nap. But I was the guy who explained to them what the enemy is trying to achieve, what the ideology of jihad is, so they can understand how to defeat the enemy better. It was an academic function.
Yeah, I remember when Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just remember some of your first speeches was talking about defeating jihad. That was when I first saw you. I blew up on the public radar after the Paris attacks. So Fox, they needed somebody to explain what the heck is going on in Paris with these jihadis just killing people left and right. And so I started doing media on Fox, and that's then the book comes out, and then the phone call from President Trump.
Then you're walking through the White House.
Then I've got this, I've got this blue badge. And this goes back to that Saturday morning, and I'm walking around an empty West Wing, and I get to the final security checkpoint where you're going from the West Wing into the actual residence, right? And there's a a uniformed security Secret Service agent there. And I ask her, how far can I go? And she says, well, what color is your badge? And I look at it. I mean, it's still warm from the printer. And it's blue. I said, you have an all access pass. And she presses the button under the desk, and the glass doors to the Rose Garden open. And it's like I'm it's in a dream. And I walk over to the basement of the residence. I walk around the China room. I hear Baron upstairs running around playing hide and go seek. It was freaky. So, I go from classrooms and military bases and FBI regional offices and field offices to being deputy to the president for strategy. So this is when the rubber hit the road, and we're there planning the defeat ISIS plan. We are in the sit room. We're on in this secure facility with outstations on secure video teleconference with the CIA, DIA, with the embassy in Kabul, you name it, and we are working on defeating ISIS, something which we were told by Obama is something you just have to get used to. He actually called it the generational threat that we're not going to defeat. President Trump comes in and says, BS, we're going to destroy these bastards. He gets the lawyers out of the way from Bragg and Delta, and we just unleash these guys to do what they do best. And within a few months, literally the biggest jihadi caliphate in the world was dust. So it went from theory and books and social media posts to
Reality.
defeating our enemies in real life.
Amazing.
Awesome.
As far as the corruption, I mean, how, we see just disgusting corruption in Washington, D.C., right? We know the story there. Knowing what you know, how do you fix it? I mean, can it even be fixed? Or are we dealing with, the Cleveland Browns where it's completely hopeless?
It's really bad. So when I arrived, I thought I was, adequately cynical, but I wasn't, despite living in DC for almost a decade. I didn't use the phrase deep state when I arrived. I said, that's a little tinfoil hattie. Within 2 weeks, I saw it with my own eyes. I mean, back to those skiffs, those secure meeting rooms, those sit room discussions, I'd sit there and I'd listen. And this is the creme de la creme. This is the SES and SIS level bureaucrats across US government. This is the highest ranking policymaking entity short of having the cabinet meet. And I'd sit there listening, and for an hour and a half, nobody mentioned the president's name. Nobody mentioned what he said yesterday about ISIS or what he said about, China the day before.
Right.
And so I said, screw this. And, after about 2 weeks of this, I'd wait till everybody preened and said what they think America should be doing. And then I'd raise my hand with a funny accent and I'd say, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, do you actually know what the elected president, the commander-in-chief, said yesterday about ISIS, what he said about China, what he said about North Korea, what he said about anything? And I'd have to assert the fact that 64 million Americans get to decide the direction of the country, not some faceless bureaucrat who's been at the CIA or the State Department for 20 years who says, I don't care who the president is. I am the decider. So
Right.
that's when I started realizing it's real. And then it got worse. I was given a classified project to work, and I couldn't do it by myself. So I said, I'm going to second people from US government to the White House for a year or two, which is utterly normal, right? I mean, the White House staff, apart from the political appointees like me, are all interagency. They're people we second from state, from DOD, from CIA, you name it. And I've trained lots of people in the intelligence community. And I did by name requests for some of my graduates, 3 from the FBI and a lady from the CIA to help me on this project. And the White House HR department said, Dr. G, not a problem. Just got to move their clearances from their parent agency over to the White House. It'll take about a week, max 2 weeks. 6 months later, nothing. And every week, the HR department said, just some, final paperwork. Don't worry about it, Dr. G. Then a senior FBI agent who's visiting the White House on another issue peels off after his meeting to come find me. It's a direct quote. He says, Seb, those 3 guys you want from the Bureau, you're never going to get them. What? And I said, what do you mean? I'm a deputy to the president. I outrank a 4-star general. What do you mean? He said, direct words, the 7th floor of the Hoover building, which is, the director, the deputy director,
Right.
The 7th floor of the Hoover building looks at this White House as the enemy. So think about that. The guys who aren't elected look at the man who is elected by the American people as the enemy. That tells you everything you need to know about what happened to Flynn, what happened to Bannon, what happened to Crossfire Hurricane, the use of surveillance against the campaign, against the White House. So it is bad. And this is the heavy lift. If we do what we're supposed to do, if we can get him back in office, my number one concern, and I've been explicit to this, I've been explicit with President Trump on my show recently, I've explicit, for the last 2 years. My number one concern, I don't care what your real issue is, whether it's the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the border, whatever it is, none of it matters unless we get personnel right. Reagan nailed it. He said personnel is policy. So I had this idea that I pitched to Steve Bannon, my boss, way back when, at the beginning of the administration, that never happened, but we need it on steroids now. And I said, look, pick some hard bastards. I'll be happy to be one of them. We need about 36 guys who are no BS, tough individuals working in teams of 2. And every Friday, they leave the White House and they go to the director of the CIA. they go to the Secretary of State, they go to the Secretary of Defense,
Right.
and they say, Mr. Secretary, what have you done to implement the president's mandate in the last 5 days? And if we don't get the right answer, we have the authority to go back on Monday morning to the president and say, that guy needs to get canned. So, we need, because we're talking about 1 million people, and we're talking about the biggest employer in the world. We need control over a bureaucracy that thinks they are unanswerable to anybody. I mean, you know how bad it is? Regular guest on my show is Secretary Robert Wilkie. He is a guy who turned around the Veterans Administration. He served in 2 armed services in America, which is pretty. I'm always impressed with guys that haven't served just once, but they've served in 2 different branches. He came in, he cleaned house, the mismanagement, the theft. He kicked out hundreds of people. The union has just done a drug deal with the Biden White House. Every single person who was fired has to get their job back. Even those who are found of gross malfeasance, those won't get their job back, but they will get 20% of the pay that they should have had since they were fired. Wow. It's like, excuse me? I mean, what? You were found guilty of stealing money or allowing veterans to die in hospital corridors, but you get your job back, or you get a lump sum of cash. Yeah. And look, this is the reason I say, this is the only reason you need to vote for President Trump. Why? Of all the people in America, there's 330 million of us, plus the illegals. There's half of that who fit the age demographic, over 35, natural born citizens. So there's 130 million people who could be president. Okay. There's only one person out of 120 million who can only serve 1 term. It's President Trump. Everybody else, from DeSantis to Haley, everybody else has a 2-term mandate, because that's our Constitution. Right. Which means what? If anybody else wins, as they're raising their hand on January 20th, what is their number one priority going to be as they're being sworn in?
Get reelected.
Bingo, right? To get reelected. Which means what?
The first 4 years are almost a waste. Yeah.
Well, it's compromise. It's footsie under the table with the rhinos. It's footsie under the table with the Democrats. This man is the only man in the world who can only serve once, which means he can come in and burn the corruption to the ground. Yep. He has nothing to lose, and he has no need to compromise. That's why it has to be President Trump.
Right. And speaking of the elections, just looking ahead to 2024, I mean, is it possible that these Democrat governors are going to leave Trump off the ballot? What happens then?
Forget just Democrat governors. We saw it last week in New Hampshire.
Right.
I mean, look at what happened. Scanlon, the Secretary of State in New Hampshire, said he was consulting with his lawyers to see if the insurrection clause of the Constitution could be used to remove his candidate, the GOP candidate, from the ballots. Now, God bless my buddy and my Salem colleague, Charlie Kirk. When he heard that, he unleashed the hounds of hell on his radio show on Monday. And all of his followers, for the radio, for the podcast, for Turning Point, less than 24 hours later, Scanlon said, oops, sorry, I didn't mean that. But no, this is, look, they can't win the election, right? So A, the rhinos hate him because they can't control him. And B, the Democrats can't win this election. I mean, look at Biden. Not only is he such a coward, he doesn't go to Shanksville, to New York or DC on September the 11th. He lies about September 11th. He said, and I was down there at ground zero the next day. No, you weren't, you bastard. It was 9 days. 9 days later, you went there. You are prepared to lie about 9/11? This is a senile, corrupt, soulless individual who talks about his Corvette when he's speaking to the people of Maui who've lost relatives, burnt alive in the fires. And the most important thing is, they don't have COVID. I mean, we know what happened in 2020. It's very clear what happened in 2020. When you mail out 81 million ballots unrequested, that's just a recipe. President Trump warned us. Even Bill Barr, before he became an utter slime ball, said, this is playing with fire. They don't have, unless COVID-24 is, magically unleashed on us from, another Chinese lab, they don't have the capacity to rig it like last time. So, yeah, it's they're going to try everything. When Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent, when a Democrat, Alan Dershowitz, on my show last week, both talk about how, you know what, they'd probably like to kill him as well. You realize this is a very serious situation we're in.
Drew?
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Just to change topics a little bit, I just want to get your thoughts on kind of where we're at with Ukraine. Many people would say a failed offensive. They're saying, oh, we didn't get weapons in time, we waited too long. Just the abuse of, or I would say mismanagement or theft of the money that we're sending over there with new defense ministers. I'm just curious, I guess, ultimately, is this something that they're trying to extend? Does this administration and or, the people in charge, if you will, do they want to drag this out? I've heard things where, we could have signed a peace treaty, a while back, but they sent Boris Johnson over there and basically said, we're not doing this. I'm just kind of curious on just your overall thoughts and where we're headed there.
Well, look, they don't have a plan. I mean, these are the dumbest bastards on the planet. I mean, look at Afghanistan.
Right.
You take out the military before you take out the civilians, and you do it from the civilian airport in the center of Kabul that is undefensible, as opposed to Bagram in the middle of nowhere that is fully defensible. When it comes to strategy, these guys are clinical cretins. So number one, they don't know. I mean, look at pencil neck Jake Sullivan. That guy is the national security advisor, our Secretary of Defense. I've saved that photograph of him in Asia, where he's got double masks on and a face shield, and he's doing a military parade inspection. You look like a cuckold. You look like some sad bastard who's being cucked by his wife.
Yeah.
You're the Secretary of Defense walking around in your face shield and your double COVID masks. And what was his last job? Yeah, he was on the board of Raytheon. I mean, that should be a crime. Yeah. When I joined the Trump administration, I was impressed. I didn't think it would happen, but my wife and I, she was a presidential appointee at DHS. I was in the White House. We had to sign. This is the president's express demand. You couldn't work in the Trump administration unless you signed a document that said you will never be a lobbyist in your life. You can't be a lobbyist. Right? I mean, this guy he's Secretary of Defense, and he's talking to his buddies at Raytheon. Hey, how much is that new missile? I mean, the people he was sitting on the board with 2 years ago, and now he's the Secretary of Defense with control over billions of dollars. So, A, they don't know what they're doing when it comes to strategy. B, they're all corrupt on our team. I mean, let's be clear. Yes, it's Eastern Europe. Everybody's corrupt in Eastern Europe, but that's not the issue, okay? The issue is our side. Let's not forget, Joe Biden was point person for Ukraine policy in the Biden administration. Right. He's the guy bragging about getting the chief prosecutor fired, who was investigating his son's company in Ukraine, Burisma, that was giving him an $83,000 a month no-show job. So the corruption, yes, sure, it's a corrupt nation, but that doesn't matter. The Russians invaded. We don't know what we're doing, and we're basically funneling money into the Democrat pockets. What should have happened? I love when people say, what would President Trump do if he were president? Well, dude, there wouldn't have been a war in the first place.
Exactly.
I mean, people forget, the Wagner Group. Everybody talks about the Wagner Group. We were on the Wagner Group back in 2017. When President Trump was informed, and this is declassified now, so I can talk about it, when he was told by our intel that there are 300 Wagner Group special forces running around Syria, destabilizing that country. What did he do? He didn't invade like some neocon lunatic. He told the Pentagon, kill them now. Send Vlad a message. Now, no president since the Soviet Revolution of 1917, not Reagan, nobody has killed 300 Russians in 24 hours. We literally turned them into red mist because the president said, you're trying to destabilize the Middle East more than it already is. Kill them and kill them all. Vladimir Putin so crapped himself, he didn't hold a press conference. He said nothing. 300 of his boys creamed in Syria, and he says nothing because he's afraid of President Trump. I stole a motto from the Marine Corps when we were in the White House, and I used it liberally. And I said, you want to understand what America under Donald Trump? It's very easy. No better friend, no worse enemy. We have the reverse. We had the reverse under Obama. We had the reverse now. Our friends feel betrayed and alone, and our enemies, oh my gosh, why did he invade? Because we surrendered Afghanistan. When he saw 13 servicemen and women murdered by ISIS in that disastrous withdrawal, Vlad said, okay, boys, roll the tanks. The news today is we are going to be giving this administration is going to be giving billions of dollars to the mullahs in Iran. This is the biggest state-sponsored terror. We are going to be paying them for hostages. When you pay for hostages, what happens? They take more hostages.
Right.
We never paid for a single hostage. If you want to look at something really interesting, of course, the mainstream media never talks about it. After this podcast, go online and look at all the dozens of hostages we got out of captivity from across the world without paying a red cent. Why? Because they knew not to mess with my boss. That's the difference. So, Ukraine, when the president, I love it when it drives these people insane, especially that CNN woman at that town hall. When the president says, I will end it in a day, he's not joking. He's not joking. He will tell Putin, stop it now. Stop it now. And Putin will say, yes, sir. And that's how you have to behave. This is the British phrase is big boys rules, right? This is the rules for big boys, not soy latte drinking pencil necks like Jake Sullivan.
Wow. Love it. Awesome. And I guess the last thing I kind of wanted to touch on is just, you look at the Republican primary, everything going on, the debates, I know just from your opinion only, but do you see anybody in there that Trump could, tap for a VP position, or do you think he'll bring somebody that's not involved in, running for president right now?
Well, this is just one last thing on Ukraine. I just want to be clear what my take is on Ukraine. Ukraine is important because this isn't about NATO threatening Russia. What, a nation with 5,000 nuclear missiles and 11 time zones? I mean, come on, guys. Seriously. This is a guy who for 21 years, since he became premier, has been saying Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states are illegitimate. They should be part of Russia. He's been saying this for 2 decades. Mm-hmm. He has been planning this for a long time. And I want everybody to understand that this is Ukraine's 1776. It's not our war to fight. We should help them, but in ways where we know how the money is being spent. Right. But if you want to know your history, if Spain, Holland, and France hadn't assisted General Washington, guess what? We would still be sitting in a colonial part of the British Empire. We would be part of the Commonwealth. The less than 1% of the colonials fought the British. And without the naval blockade of the French, the assistance of the Dutch and the Spanish, we never would have won. So we are now we are the Dutch and the French to the Ukraine. This is their 1776. With regards to the debate, look, it's weird now because the conventional wisdom is the VP is important because the VP brings another demographic or another regional voting base that the top of the ticket doesn't. So, you have a north-south, you have east-west or whatever. I don't think that counts anymore. I don't think the old politics matters anymore. And to be honest, the VP is irrelevant. How many people, can you remember going into the voting booth and saying, I'm going to vote for this guy because of who his vice president is? It's like, nobody does that. Nobody does that. I had thought Tim Scott could be interesting, but he was like the amazing disappearing man at the debate. He's like, it's as if he wasn't there. The only other people, everybody else is a rhino or a loony. Chris Christie is like the psycho ex-girlfriend. Nikki Haley is a swamp creature. I mean, did you hear what he said yesterday? Chris Christie said in an interview, and if he doesn't debate me, if he doesn't come to the debates, I'm going to get the route of his campaign bus, and I'm going to follow him everywhere. It's like, dude, he doesn't use a bus. He's actually got a Boeing. And number 2, are you like the stalking ex-girlfriend? You're going to follow him around? That's like, who's living rent-free in whose head, Chris? Right. I mean, that is just scary. Of all the others, I'm massively disappointed with Mike Pence. Just a disaster. Mm-hmm. He was good to me in the White House, but man, oh man, has he become like, Mr. Establishment. The only guy I like, although his foreign policy stuff is a little crazy when it comes to Israel especially, I've said this to Vivek. I've had Vivek on my show for an hour or longer. And I've said he should be the Jared Kushner of a second Trump term, right? He knows nothing about politics, knows nothing about foreign policy, but dude, he's a self-made billionaire in biotech who hates the way business is done. No, his recent clip, I'm going to play today on the show, of why big donors are so dangerous and why he's proud of having small donors and his own wealth to fund him. That's right on. So he would be cool as a kind of innovation czar, as a business innovation czar. But when it comes to V, look, she has no political experience in the classical sense, but I love Carrie Lake. She's a fighter. She could be fun as
we need her here in Arizona.
Yeah, we need her here.
I know, but I know. She needs to fix Arizona first. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
No. Is there anything that you want to bring up, just to, whether it be your book or any shows that you're doing, any current events you want to, share with us?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it.
Well, look, I'm on the road. It's, the election craziness is starting, so I'm going to be on the road a lot this fall, probably next year as well. If you follow me on Twitter at Seb Gorka, Facebook, Instagram, you'll get all the latest updates from my show, my analysis. I've got a Substack as well for original pieces. I just dropped a piece on the only real lesson of 9/11 that matters at sebastiangorka.substack.com. But let me just, send a personal message. So when the president announced, and I would say, if you haven't seen it, go back and watch the president's 30-minute speech from Mar-a-Lago last November when he announced, because it's really quite stunning when you see a man who's been through what he's been through decide to do it again. I mean, I was there, and it kind of kicked me in the gut when I realized, he's doing this again. I was in Mar-a-Lago eating, the coconut shrimp, waiting for the president. What was my wife doing that day? She got up. It was the day of the midterms, and she got up at 3:30, left the house at 4 a.m. And I was still in Florida, and I could see on the security cameras that she came home to our place in Virginia at 10 o'clock at night. So while I'm eating the coconut shrimp, what is my wife doing for 18 hours? She's the chief election officer for our part of Virginia, and she hates politics. And I guarantee you that nobody screwed with the votes when Katie was on deck. Not only that, as a woman who hates politics, when she heard about the local community center having a drag queen story hour for children, she said, not happening. She ran to be on the board. They defeated her with mail-in ballots. She ran again this year, and she won. So, if my sane wife who hates politics can do a 18-hour day securing the election, if she can run for local office, I'm asking everyone who's watching and listening, what the hell are you doing? It's nice to listen to great podcasts or, my radio show or my TV show on Newsmax, but what are you doing? What are you doing? Here's a shocking statistic. We bitch and moan about the GOP and the rhinos. My former Breitbart colleague, Raheem Kassam, he said this live on air, and then I had to fact check it afterwards, and he was right. Of all the positions in the GOP across America, and I mean not this, the serious ones like a precinct captain. That's work, but the ones beneath precinct captain who may be a day a month or maybe a day and a half a month, more than 45% of those positions are empty. So what are you moaning about? We are the GOP. If you don't like what you're seeing, if you don't like Mitch McConnell, if you don't like Mitt Romney, what are you doing about it? Are you running for local office? Right. Are you a chief election officer like my wife is? It's up to us, guys. Remember what the left did. The left are genius. Tip O'Neill had this phrase in the 90s, all politics is local. And don't get me wrong, it's cool to be president. It's cool to work in the White House. It's cool to be a senator. But where's America? De Tocqueville nailed it. America is where the local community is. And that's how they stole it from us. Whether it's George Soros and his lunatic pro-criminal prosecutors, whether it's when we arrived to Virginia 15 years ago, the local school board, all 9 members were radical Democrats, and not one of them had a child in the Fairfax County school system. And we're surprised that, girls are getting raped by transgender boys in bathrooms in public school. We're surprised. Guys, get engaged. I don't care how old you are. I don't know how crippled you are in terms of, social media and technology. Run. Take back America. One county commissioner, one school board meeting, one local community center board at a time, because that's how they did it. And we need to take it back before it's too late. So guys, ask yourself seriously, what are you doing to save America?
That's a great point. Well,
Love
Dr.
it.
Gorka, we really appreciate you coming on and taking the time. Everybody can go out and get your book, The War for America's Soul, sebgorka.com, and we really appreciate it, Doc.
Yeah, it was a great time. God bless you all, and let's win it.
Absolutely.
Never surrender. God bless.
God bless.
Never.
Cheers.
God bless.
That was awesome.
That was cool. Dr. G. He's always fun.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
He was over here at the store the other day, at the storefront. Remember he came in?
Yeah.
And we gave him a copy of, what was it, George Magazine. He came by, said hi to everybody, hung out in the office for a little bit. James wasn't here, but that was okay. So yeah, that was fun.
Got to shake his hand.
Really interesting stuff, though, that he brings up about, just his time in the White House and getting the clearance to walk around. Like, that is wild.
Yeah.
That
Could
is
you imagine?
wild.
Like, oh, you got a blue pass.
Yeah.
It's a self-guided tour. Go ahead.
He's a man with a resume that reads like the Cooperstown Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was great having him on.
Fantastic. Jay, great job with the technical side of it. Sound was great. Video was great.
Thanks for watching, and we hope you liked the interview with Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.